Today, you scrolled past someone's vacation photos. Turquoise water, a cocktail, with a little umbrella in it. You can almost smell the sunscreen through the screen. You don't even particularly like this person, but something happens anyway. A quiet itch, a small, almost invisible shift. And by the end of the week, you've spent money you didn't plan to spend on something you didn't actually want. Some part of you already knew something was off. You just didn't have a name for it yet. Here's what nobody tells you about that moment. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't jealousy. It was a system that has been running inside your brain. Since before you had a salary. Since before you had a bank account. Since before you knew what money even was. And it has a price tag most people never calculate. The number might surprise you. The standard story goes like this. You spend too much because you lack discipline. You need a budget. You need willpower. You need to stop treating yourself. And maybe you've told yourself that story more than once. But that framing, it misses the actual mechanism entirely. The real force driving your spending isn't moral failure. It's measurement. Your brain doesn't evaluate your life in absolute terms. It evaluates it in relative ones. Not do I have enough, but do I have enough compared to them? Psychologists call this social comparison theory. And it is not a bug in human cognition. It is a feature, a deeply ancient one. For most of human history, your social rank within your group determined your access to food, safety, resources. Falling behind wasn't embarrassing. It was dangerous. So your brain evolved a constant, automatic scanning mechanism, a comparison engine that never switches off. It runs in the background of every purchase, every upgrade, every financial decision you make. The problem? The engine was calibrated for a world of 150 people, not a world with 3.5 billion people on social media. Leon Festinger introduced social comparison theory in 1954, and his core finding is held up across decades of research. People determined their social and economic standing by comparing themselves to others, not to some objective standard, to people. And here's where it gets interesting. We don't compare ourselves to just anyone. We compare upward, almost automatically toward people who appear slightly above us, which means the comparison engine isn't measuring your life against the average. It's measuring it against the best-looking slice of everyone around you. And in 1954, that slice was limited. Your neighbors, your coworkers, maybe the people in a magazine. Now, it's infinite, curated, available at 2 a.m., right in your pocket. Every highlight reel, from every social circle you've ever touched, all arriving simultaneously, all optimized to look aspirational. The comparison engine was not designed for this volume, and so it misfires, constantly. Here's what that misfiring looks like in your actual finances. Researchers found that when people are exposed to higher income peers, even briefly, their own spending increases, even when their income hasn't changed. The mechanism isn't envy. It's recalibration. Your brain quietly updates its internal reference point for what normal looks like. And once that reference point moves up, spending at your previous level starts to feel like falling behind. Not logically, emotionally. The sensation is closer to unease than desire. And unease is a powerful spending trigger. There's a specific kind of feeling that comes with realizing this. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind you feel at 11 p.m., looking at a credit card statement, thinking, why did I buy that? You know that feeling. It's not random. It never was. This is what economists call the expenditure cascade, the idea that consumption patterns ripple downward through income groups, as people imitate the spending of those just above them. Robert Frank at Cornell has written extensively on how this plays out. One income tier upgrades their cars, and the tier just below them quietly upgrades theirs too. Not because they can afford it, but because the reference point shifted. The cascade doesn't require malice. It doesn't require stupidity. It just requires a brain doing exactly what evolution designed it to do. Now here's the number. Research found that households in areas with high visible wealth inequality, where the gap between what your neighbors own and what you can afford is most stark, carried measurably higher debt and lower savings rates than demographically similar households. In more uniform neighborhoods, same income, same age, same education, different reference group, different financial outcome. The comparison engine, running silently in the background, produced a gap that showed up in real dollars. And the people driving that gap weren't comparing themselves to strangers. They were comparing themselves to people they knew. Sometimes, people they didn't even like. That's the part nobody talks about. You don't have to admire someone for them to become your spending benchmark. You don't have to want their life. You just have to see it often enough that your brain registers it as the new baseline for normal. The comparison engine doesn't ask whether you like the person. It just logs the data point. Think about that for a second, and then your spending changes. This is why financial discipline is so much harder than it looks on paper. It's not that budgets are complicated. It's that your reference point is being updated in real time by sources you didn't consciously choose, faster than any spreadsheet can respond to. You're not competing with a number. You're competing with a feeling. And feelings recalibrate much faster than bank balances do. There's another dimension to this, and it's even harder to catch in yourself. The comparison doesn't always feel like comparison. Sometimes it arrives as taste, as preference, as a sudden conviction that your current car, your current apartment, your current wardrobe has simply become inadequate. Not because anything changed about it, but because your internal standard shifted. Behavioral economists call this the hedonic treadmill, where your satisfaction with what you own isn't a fixed function of the object. It's a function of the gap between what you have and what your comparison group currently displays. Close the gap, satisfaction returns, briefly. Then the reference point moves again, and the treadmill speeds up. What makes this particularly costly is the invisibility of the trigger. There's no moment where you think, I am now engaging in upward social comparison and adjusting my expenditure accordingly. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like a Tuesday. It feels like you just want something. But by the time you're standing in a store or clicking through a checkout screen, the decision has already been made, at a level you didn't have access to. The comparison engine did its work quietly, and your wallet is simply following instructions. Think about that for a second. The comparison engine doesn't just affect what you spend. It affects what you save. And it does it in a way that is almost perfectly backwards from how it feels in the moment. When your reference group is spending visibly on cars, on trips, on renovations, saving and investing feel like falling behind. Not like building, not like winning, like losing. Because your brain isn't comparing your net worth to theirs. It can't see net worth. It can only see what's visible. And what's visible is consumption. Nobody posts a photo of their Roth IRA balance. Nobody drives their net worth past your house. And honestly, maybe they should. Because here's what that silence is costing you. Run this pattern for 10 years, and the gap between what you saved and what you could have saved isn't a rounding error. It's a house. It's a decade of freedom. It's real. This is what Kahneman and Tversky's work on loss aversion shows so clearly. The psychological pain of a perceived loss is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Translated into the comparison context, the feeling of falling behind your reference group is twice as motivating as the feeling of getting ahead financially. Even when getting ahead is exactly what you're doing. Your comparison engine experiences a growing savings account as invisible. It experiences a neighbor's new car as a loss, and it reacts accordingly. So what actually breaks the cycle? The counterintuitive move, the one that works, is to change your comparison group. Deliberately. Not to feel superior to anyone, but because your financial behavior is downstream of your reference point. And your reference point is downstream of who you watch. Research consistently shows that people adopt the financial norms of their immediate peer environment. The savings rates, the spending patterns, the attitudes toward debt. If your environment benchmarks against consumption, you'll spend. If your environment benchmarks against financial independence, you'll save and invest. The comparison engine doesn't care which direction it runs. It just runs. So, point it somewhere useful. Bring it back to your own life now. Think about the last 3 purchases that felt slightly off, slightly larger than you'd planned, slightly harder to justify afterward. Ask yourself honestly, what was the reference point? Whose life, whose visible consumption was quietly in the frame when you made that decision? You might be surprised how often there's an answer. How often the comparison engine was already running before you even reach for your card. Here's what the comparison engine never tells you. The people you're benchmarking against are benchmarking against someone else. The cascade goes all the way up. Nobody at any level feels like they've arrived. The reference point always moves, which means the only way to win this game is to stop playing it against other people and start measuring yourself against the version of your life you actually want. Tomorrow, you'll scroll past someone's vacation photos again. Turquoise water, a cocktail with an umbrella in it. You can almost smell the sunscreen through the screen. The comparison engine will fire up, the way it always does. But now, you know what's running. And knowing what's running, that changes everything. Quietly, without fanfare. Everything. Remember that none of this is financial advice. It is an invitation to think about your spending habits. If this one made you think, like and subscribe. See you in the next one.